The two most important stitches you are going to have in your arsenal is the straight stitch and the zigzag stitch. I've already talked a little about the straight stitch. If you haven't seen it yet, go check out that video. And today, let me show you the zigzag stitch. How to set it up, how to use it, and most importantly, when you're going to use it. And a couple little tips and tricks as well. This is the zigzag stitch here. It is a back and forth stitch that can vary in width and length as you choose. Let's start by setting up the zigzag stitch on my machine. So my zigzag stitch is this one here. It's in the same setting as my straight stitch, so I don't actually need to change anything here. I just need to make sure that I'm on the green side of my stitch selection. You're going to want to play around with the stitch length a little bit because that can change the look of the zigzag. But I will say that I tend to like mine a little bit smaller than my usual. So I'm going to start with a 1.5 and play around with it from there. Now this is where the magic happens. We already know that this middle portion here changes the needle position. The outer portion changes the width of the stitch. Currently it's at 0 because I have a straight stitch set. If I switch it all the way to 5, this is going to be the widest stitch my machine can do. A 3 might be somewhere in the middle. Either way, you're getting a zigzag at this point. I'm going to start with a 5 for now and play around with it. All right, let's begin. Put a piece of fabric in, lower the needle, lower the presser foot, and I forgot to hold my threads here like I've instructed you to do. Do as I say, not as I do. I am just lucky that my bobbin did not get tangled up. A back stitch is the same process as like with a straight stitch. I lift my little lever for my stitch length and it goes backwards. Once I drop the lever, it goes back forwards again. And I'll show you what that looks like on a zigzag. This is where I back stitched, so you can see what that looks like. Let's try it with a slightly smaller stitch width now to see the difference. Here's the difference there. So this is the stitch width of 5 and this one is a stitch width of 3. You can also play around with the stitch length. So here's our samples so far. We've got a stitch width of 5 with a length of 1.5. A stitch width of 3 with a length of 1.5, and a stitch width of 3 with a length of 5. You can see how playing around can totally change the zigzag. Now let me show you how to turn while doing a zigzag stitch. So in practice, doing a corner is exactly the same as if you were doing it with a straight stitch. However, the look of the stitch changes based on whether your needle is inside the corner or outside the corner when turning. So this first one I'm doing is inside the corner. So there will be a little bit of a gap where no stitching occurs on that outside edge of the corner. Don't worry, I'll show you my work and what I mean by all this in a moment. So on this next corner turn that I'm doing, my needle is on the outside edge. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap between the stitches once it makes this curve. So on the left-hand side is the corner in which my needle was on the inside when I made the turn. On the right-hand side is the corner in which my needle was on the outside when I turned. So one side has a little bit of gap in the corner, the other side it overlaps. So this is great and all, but like, when are you going to need a zigzag stitch? Well, let me tell you. The most common reason is as an edge stitch. This is a great way to finish any raw edge of fabric if you don't have an overlock machine. You can see that although there are still bits of thread hanging out here, I can't pull anything out. So if I make a garment and I put this zigzag stitch on all the raw edges, I can wash the garment and it's not going to fray. So let me show you how to do that, and this is going to take some practice. Position the fabric so that when the needle goes down on the left side, it hits the fabric, and on the right side, it goes just to the edge or maybe even slightly off the edge. So here's the results of that one. This is a stitch width of 3. We can also play around with the width as well, and I'll show you it with a stitch width of 5 now. So here's the results of that. This one is the stitch width of 5. There's a different colored thread on the back, don't worry about that. And this is the stitch width of 3. This fabric seems pretty secure with either option, but if you have fabric that frays a lot, you might want to go with the wider stitch width, or as wide as possible. You'll notice though when I show the back side, the bottom edge is curling under just a little bit. This is still really secure, it's just not as attractive. So I need to adjust my tension settings a little bit when I change to a zigzag stitch, or my sewing machine came with a foot just for this purpose. In Bernina world, this is foot number 2, so you can see how important it is. It's called the Overlock Foot. It looks like only half a foot, so that way you can see the edge of your fabric really easily, but its main feature is it has this little bar underneath, and the sewing machine needle crosses that bar when it goes from one side to the other, which adds just a little bit of slack in the upper thread and is supposed to help with that curling on the edge. So now let me show you how to change your foot. You're just going to pull this little pin back here, slide that up and out, and pop that straight down. And then you're just going to fit this little hole onto this peg. Yep. And just a quick PSA so you don't break your machine needle, make sure that your stitch width is wide enough so the needle doesn't hit the bar on the right side when it's going down. Exactly the same as with my other foot, I'm just going so that the right side of my needle just barely hits the edge or just slightly outside the edge of the fabric. So this portion here is the one I used with my regular straight stitch foot, and this portion here is the one I used with my overlock foot. It's still curled under just a little bit, but mostly that's just because I didn't backstitch before or after, so the threads just got pulled a little bit when I was pulling it out from the machine. Overall, it's a lot flatter. Another reason you might use a zigzag stitch is to finish off something with stretch. This is just a piece of t-shirt material here, a cotton ribbed t-shirt material, and you can see where I hemmed it with a straight stitch. It has a little bit of stretch to it, but not a ton, just because the nature of the straight stitches are going to prevent it from stretching. Whereas on my zigzag stitch, I have a lot more stretch ability here. And the last reason you might use a zigzag stitch is for decorative things, like applying this applique. With a complicated shape like this, a cat, it's almost impossible to fold all of the edges under to keep things from fraying. Instead, this top fabric is fused with interfacing, and then there is a teeny tiny zigzag stitch all the way around the edges. We're talking like a stitch width of 3 and a length of like maybe 0.5. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. And your homework for the week is to go practice your zigzag stitch.